So I want to look a little bit at how Curatr can be used for literary scholarship. That's my disciplinary background. And in particular, how it can be used to explore attitudes and associations around different ethnic groups. We have 3 case studies, Irish, Eastern European, Jewish and Italian migrants in the Victorian period. And I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about how we might use the Curatr platform to compare representations of Irish and Eastern European Jewish or ethnically Jewish characters within the Victorian novel. The case studies are parallel, but as we keep digging, the comparative approach is becoming more productive. And I'm going to focus in on Anthony Trollope's Palliser novels, 1864 to 1880, much adapted. There was recently a very popular adaptation on BBC Radio 4. There's a famous TV adaptation from the 1970s. So these are texts which have a long afterlife and a long kind of tail within the culture. Within the text, we can see a tendency towards political allegory, which is often in contradiction with the social realist framework within which Trollope is working. And immigrants seem to cause particular tension between the kind of didactic political purpose of Trollope in the novels and a commitment, and there is a commitment there, to social realism. James Buzzard doesn't include Trollope in Disorienting Fiction, which is his analysis of the emergence of an ethnographic mode within fiction, which he argues precedes the emergence of anthropology and ethnographic approaches within social sciences. But certainly within Trollope, you can see this thick description of social existence at every step, really, within the novels. There is a class bias within it, and we can talk a little bit about that as we go through this. There's an unresolved tension in Phineas Finn, which is a novel which introduces our Irish migrant protagonists into the series, between the ethnographic and allegorical impulses of the novel. Phineas is Trollope's ideal Irishman of the future, about the first Irishman we've had that has been worth his salt, says the Prime Minister in the novel. This is, on one level, a cliche. He is handsome, he's charming, but he is also a kind of very robust reaction to many of the negative stereotypes around Irishness. And as we know, Trollope had a very positive relationship with Ireland himself. It was very good for him. That did not lead him to imagine that it would be very good for it to govern itself, for example. So that's one thematic within this. This is very much an allegory of integration, but it keeps going wrong. Phineas could have this great career in London, but various incidents get in his way. So how relevant is the use of data analytics techniques to exploring the nuances in Trollope's depiction of Irishness and Jewishness within these novels? During the period that he produced the Palliser novels, there was a very distinct increase in the number of Jewish Britons, Jewish people living in Britain. In parallel, the Irish as a percentage of the workforce in Ireland were starting to tail off. I'll chart on that in a minute. And without raising any contemporary parallels, immigration was a vital factor in the progress of the Industrial Revolution. But you can see there that the percentage of Irish in the British workforce is declining in that. You also have, during the period in which Phineas Finn, for example, is published in serial form, a great deal of debate about reform in Ireland, but also reform in relation to the vote and the franchise in Britain. You have the Fenian raids on Canada, and you have a lot of Fenian activity which is very carefully avoided in the references within the novel. It's almost completely occluded from the context in which Phineas Finn is operating. So that table there is one that I produced about 5 years ago when I started working on Trollope, okay? And it's very crude, and it's very specific to the references within that one novel. This is what I'm getting from Curatr for the period over which the Palliser novels is produced. I'm experimenting at the moment with creating a concordance for the Pallisers and then a concordance of the periodicals in which they are serialized,